Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar in the LEADAg Industry Insight Series. We are so glad to have you join us today. I'm Meg McCosker, the Ag Workforce Officer for Central West Queensland. The purpose of this series is to talk with industry leaders and mentors, such as Sam and Negan today, as they will give us, as we can talk about the industry and identify the endless career opportunities available. Before I formally introduce our guests, there are a few housekeeping rules for today's webinar. I will be recording the webinar, and it is recording at the moment, because there are some people that are unable to attend in person and would like recording. So you'll be able to find our recording on our YouTube channel, which I'll edit and then post there in the next couple of days. And once it's ready, I'll send out a link. Sam will be our first presenter, followed by Megan. They will do their presentations, and I'm going to say that loosely because we're also going to treat this as a discussion. And then we'll have time allocated at the end for questions. But if you do have any burning questions during the presentation, you can put them in the chat box and I will moderate that for you throughout. We will weave the questions throughout as well as have question time at the end, as I mentioned. To reduce the interruption and feedback, I have muted everyone. However, we do encourage videos because it's always nice to look at faces rather than just letters on the screen. However, because this is going to be recorded and posted to YouTube, if you don't want your face on there, we also totally understand. And finally, and this is a big one, and I say this every webinar and I will continue to say it until the end of time, but there is no such thing as a silly question. It is highly likely that if you're thinking it, there's someone else also thinking the same question. So please ask them. Because our presenters, Megan and Sam, and mentors, I should say, have taken the time to be with us today and share their knowledge and expertise. So we need to take advantage of that while we can. So with all of that covered, I'd like to introduce our first presenter today, which is Sam Cobb. Sam and her husband own and operate Cobb Cattle Co in Central Queensland. She has an extensive experience in the industry, having grown up and worked on various cattle stations, both in Australia and the USA. However, she has spent majority of her life here in CQ. Sam is a Chirrup board member, a LEADAg working group member, and a mentor of the program as well. I'll let Sam go into depth and provide more information about herself, what she does day to day in her business as an employer and a team member, and how she gets involved in the industry and any advice she has for young up-and-comers. Sam, all yours.
Thank you, Meg. Thanks, Meg. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. So a quick overview of my life. I'll try and make it as quick as I can, and then speak, as Meg said, on the facets of employment. That hopefully gives some insights into going forward as potential employers. So I was born, as Meg said, born and bred into beef grazing country, and had a very typical bush upbringing of with parents who managed and owned cattle stations predominantly in Central Queensland. So my love of ag was born from many childhood years around cattle and horses. After boarding school, I followed the trend and applied for university and was accepted into Gatton, into University of Queensland Gatton College, and thankfully had the foresight to defer because I really had no clue what I wanted to do, and definitely would not have committed to further study after school. So around the same time, I stumbled upon an organisation called International Agriculture Exchange Association, which is in the Queensland Country Life newspaper. So after just shy of my 18th birthday, I flew to Montana in America and worked for beef ranchers over there who also train cutting horses. So it was a fantastic year and still remains to be one of the highlights of my life so far. I highly recommend travelling and seeing what the rest of the world's got to offer. It was a really great thing for me to do. When I returned home, we were in a horrific drought at home. Mum and Dad had a few places across Central Queensland by this stage, and so I deferred uni again, deferred going to uni, sorry, and yeah, I stayed home for best part of 12 months and helped them with getting cattle across Queensland, across the Gulf, and then northern New South Wales into adjustment blocks there. I was given a lot of responsibility for the year with several thousand head of cattle, and so it was more great learnings for me, and quick growing up period. So while I was doing that, I did study externally just so I could work out if uni was what I wanted to do eventually, and I found I really enjoyed that study. So when it did rain, I headed off to Gatton for a couple of years, finished that study. I was putting myself through, so while I was down at Gatton, I did whatever I could get my hands on to get some cash in my depleted pockets. So I worked in feedlots. I worked for the DPI for a bit. I did work for the college itself, anything that I could do really that earned me some cash. And I went cotton chipping out at St. George and planted and harvested rockmelon, and they're all, great experiences because I've, not had those opportunities again. So I'm really glad that I took them while I could. So after uni, I headed back to central Queensland, and I really just spent the next couple of years upskilling. I worked on properties for mum and dad, but also for other people in the area, and did whatever, there was lots of courses in those years following that drought that, you could learn out of AI, preg test, world shoe, grazing courses, horsemanship, whatever. There was some really great courses getting around, so I just got myself to as many of those as I could through those years, and just built my toolbox. So as Meg said, my husband and I now own our own business. We've been at Melaleuca for about 24 years. We started managing it. It was a property, one of the places of my parents, and through succession and fairly healthy debt, we now own our own business, Cobb Cattle Company. We run around 4,000 head of cattle, breeding and growing a predominantly Brahman-based herd, infused with Brangus and Droughtmaster bulls. We're very focused on land condition and productivity in our business, and we still spend a good part of our time learning, like off farm and on farm, and believe that's been the biggest benefit to our business going forward. So day to day, gosh, that's what I love about agriculture. It's different every day. Yesterday I was in the yards all day, and today, in the office. So it's, running a business, there is a fair bit of office time, but I still am able to get out, and my husband and I run the property side by side. So we're working our cattle. We rotate all our cattle, so we're out the paddock quite a bit doing that. So like any business, it takes a good team to run a business like this. And I guess that takes me to the second part of conversation today, and that's around employment. So on a bit of a side note here, in my experience gained from working for and now with many people, I believe one of the most important aspects of business and personal is communication. So I will base the rest of my talk today around how we communicate as employers and employees. So the first form of communication, I believe, as an potential employee is not actually a resume, as we might think, but it's actually, I think, your social media presence. So the first thing, that I actually do, and I know I'm not alone in this, but the first thing I do when a resume crosses my inbox is to go to the social media platforms and check out that person, potential employee. And I think, I don't want to bang on as we can as parents to our teenage kids about how important it is about what you put on your social media platforms or what you're involved in, what what is shared about you. But yeah, I can tell you that your future employees, your future business partners, and even life partners are potentially, they have access to that. I was talking about this recently, and someone said, what if I've got a private settings? Well, I'm no computer hacker, and it doesn't take me very long to find something on social media around someone that's applied for a position with us. So yeah, go with caution on what is put on social media. For me, it just tells me what sort of person that potential employee is. If there's reams and reams of pig chasing videos and whatnot, then it's probably not the attitude that we really want in our workplace. And the resume may read great team players and great skill base, but if that social media platform's not really shaping up the same way, then that's fairly big indication to us about about the sort of person that I'm potentially looking at. So the second one is, of course, the resume, and I think it's really important to have that as professional but realistic as can be, and truthful. There's no use putting on there if you've only ridden a horse a couple of times. No use putting on there that you've can ride a horse, because first of all, it's a safety issue. If someone believes that you've written and explained to them that you're quite accomplished, and they put you on a horse that's too good for you, well, that's pretty unsafe. It also is a trust issue as well. If you let someone know that or believe that you are accomplished in welding or fencing or whatever, riding a bike, and it's pretty obvious in the first few days that that's not the case, then it's hard for an employer to go forward trusting everything that you tell them. So it's a good idea to have a good resume, a truthful resume, and someone, it's great to have someone else to look over it before you send it off to, and also referees is another note to make sure those referees are not related to you for a start, and also usually not someone that you've worked with. If you're a young person, then there's no use putting your mate on there. You need to have someone on there that's been knowing you for some time, like a family friend, or someone that you've worked for.
But you can also have,
if you are, sorry, go.
Sorry, I was about to say, you could also have character references, can't you?
Absolutely.
on your resume, and so that could be an old family friend that can vouch for your character as a not necessarily your work ethic if they haven't worked with you side by side, but as a person, which that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely, Meg. That's spot on. Yeah, so and if you are young and haven't been in the workforce for very long at all, or still at school, haven't been there at all, you might have done some work experience even. So those sort of people are great to have on that resume as well. So the next thing is the interview. So a phone interview usually for where we live. So yeah, it's always great there to have some notes. And ask some questions about the operation is always a big positive. So it just shows that as a potential employee, you've given it some thought about where you're going to go, what the operation's all about, and shows a bit of initiative, which I'll talk a little bit on further down. But pay is very important, but it isn't probably the best thing to be asking those sort of questions straight up. I think that is definitely something that's important for both parties, but it's more important for you to gain knowledge of where the work is and what's expected of you. So yeah, those interviews that we've conducted and the people have asked a lot of questions of us and our operation has given us a great insight into that person being someone that we actually, yeah, really would like to have on our team. So yeah, that goes into then the first impression. So when, you know, that may be a second interview maybe, or it may be the day that you're turning up to start work. And again, you are communicating with your potential employer in how you present yourself. So again, sounding like a parent banging on morals to kids, but you know, tucked in shirts, polished boots, those sorts of things, they all do stand well when you're presenting yourself to any sort of workforce. So the appearance of yourself, but also the state of the vehicle that you might drive out there is a really good indication to the employer on how you conduct yourself and how you are probably going to care for the employer's gear. Now, I talked about initiative, and I do think this is initiative and enthusiasm for us is yeah, number one, really. Like, you know, that yeah, when you've got a couple of resumes in front of you and one may show that someone's had a lot of experience and skills, but their attitude may not be spot on, they mightn't have a lot of enthusiasm around them. Then you'll see another resume that has someone with barely any experience, or a lot less at least, but a great deal of enthusiasm and initiative. Then yeah, the latter is, you know, that's the attitude that we're looking for in our team. And I think I can pretty well speak for most teams and industries too, in that hands down beats skill every time. So initiative, yeah, can definitely get you places. And there is a bit of a saying that, yeah, you can't, you know, you can teach skill, but you've got to employ attitude, and we definitely do roll like that in our business. Yeah. So even within experience, you know, initiative for us looks like someone that's, you know, if there's 5 minutes in the shed, they pick up a broom, they clean a vehicle, they, you know, they look around and look for stuff to do. And it also goes forward to the rest of your working life too. As I spoke about before, you know, when I had the opportunity as a young person, and still do, to upskill, I think that, you know, a lot of that will be provided by employers, but when you've got an employee that comes to us or comes to me with a school that's in the area, a preg testing school or dog school or whatever, they've seeked that out. They've shown me initiative that they've gone and looked for that, seek that out themselves, and they're interested in it. And, you know, that goes a long way. And more than likely, you'll find that not only will the employer give you time to go and do that, but they'll probably pay for it too. So it's upskilling yourself, and it's in turn upskilling the industry. So yeah, the other thing is just, you know, initiative around the operation that you're working into. Like, we really do you know, favour those who are interested in our industry and our operation. So if they, you know, want to know more about why we do what we do, then that's yeah, that's always a great shows us great enthusiasm and experience going forward. Yeah, initiation going forward. So in finishing, I guess, yeah, I just wanted to say that to any young people out there about trying to gain a bit of work experience if you aren't able to get out in the ag industry. You know, you're not born into it. Trying to get a little bit of work experience in the holidays is a great way going forward. Yeah, and yeah, and then I guess too, the other one I did want to add there too quickly was just to try and stay in a, Meg might talk about this a little bit later on, but try and stay in a position for you know, a couple of years at least, because it will, like the first year is usually just teething, and then the second year you can really get your hands dirty in that operation. And we have found that a lot, and I do look for that in a resume too. If someone has had that on their resume, that they've been in a few jobs for some time, it shows that they're committed to that workplace. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know you touched really briefly on like the traits you really look for, but in terms of like, I guess, traits and also the most valuable skills, this was a question that was sent through, what are the most valuable skills that you look for, both practical and I guess attitude-wise, in a cattle operation?
Yeah, so like I said, like we don't always, and maybe that's because of the size of our operation. Like we're not 2 million acres, we're 70,000 acres. So, you know, we can take on people that are inexperienced, that's for sure. But it is more about that enthusiasm for what we're trying to do, and also a good bit of common sense goes a long way too. And like I said before, like there's a lot in that, you know, being able to teach skills, but we can't really teach attitude. That's someone's, you know, that's their personality. So that's what we try and employ is attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest things I just took away from your whole chat is how important attitude and communication is. But a big one, and I think it kind of rings out through the entire industry, is honesty and how you carry yourself. Because you said it's really important to be honest on a resume, and I think I would almost say all employers, if you had someone come to you and say, I don't have these skills, but I'm very, very willing to learn and put in the time and effort, they are more likely to go a lot further in the industry than someone that says, oh yeah, I've done this many hours on a horse, and not necessarily being truthful about it. So that is major and really important to keep in mind when writing your resumes.
Absolutely.
And just really quickly before I hand it over to Megan, what do you think about cover letters? I know some employees love them, some employees don't think that they're as important, but I think it's a cool way to give the employer a bit more information about yourself as an employer. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like a good cover letter. I think a resume, while it should read professionally, you know, it should be proofread and spell checked and be dotted and, you know, crossed and whatever. I think a cover letter is a lot more personal. So to have that as well, it also gives opportunity for the employee to put forward their goals as well, and that's important in an operation. You know, it's while we as employers are wanting to you know, better our own operation, we know that we can't do that without the employee also bettering their lives as well. So you know, if we've got a good understanding of what their goals and aspirations are, then you know, you can see where that can fit into your business.
And then you can work with the team to achieve it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. Very good. Well, we might jump over to Megan because I've got a couple of questions for you both at the end, so we can continue this discussion then. But our second guest today, so thank you, Sam. Sorry, thank you very much. So our second guest today is Negan Munchenberg. Megan has a bit of a different story. Before I kick off, though, I'm just going to quickly spotlight you so you're in front of everyone. Here we are. So yeah, Negan has a bit of a different story where she was actually born and raised in the centre of Sydney. And I have had a few students come to me, and we actually had one in the pilot course who was from the centre of Brisbane and had very little experience in ag. So, and it's not something that you typically hear of in the industry. So her initial interest in ag started from riding horses and wanting a job where she could ride every day. Megan currently wears many hats, from a northern production advisor with Paraway Pastoral, a beef extension officer with the Department of Ag and Fisheries, and a director for the Southern Gulf NRM board. Now that I've painted a bit of a picture, I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Megan, and you can provide some more insights on what you do today and advice you have and everything.
Yeah, thanks for having me along. It's great to talk to a bunch of people that are really passionate about ag, because as you heard at the start there, I was a bit of a surfy chick from Cronulla originally when I was a teenager, and had a bit of an experience when I was 7 years old where I went horse riding, and that was it. Then I was hooked. There was no returning that, and my parents regretted it ever since probably. But for me, that was my hook into agriculture. And finally, after being a slave at a riding school where I could scab some free riding lessons and things like that for the first, well, probably 9 years of riding, every single weekend, my poor old dad would drive me out there, and that was my passion when I was young. It definitely kept me out of trouble though, and away from all the, the temptations of a city lifestyle. And for me, I just never really felt that a lifestyle in the city was something I had an interest in. So when I was in year 10, I actually found a school that offered horses through year 11 and 12, and I finally convinced my parents to let me go, and it happened to be a boarding school in Armidale. So that was a good opportunity for me to sort of get into a boarding school that was really ag focused, and I did ag science and horse riding, and met some girls who were off big properties in Queensland. And before that moment, I'd never had a clue about anything to do with Queensland apart from pretty much the Gold Coast or Brisbane, and maybe I'd heard of Cairns, but everything outside that sort of East Coast was like a mystery. And that's something that I've really come across a lot since being an adult working in northwest Queensland, is people think of Brisbane or the Gold Coast, but they don't think of anywhere else, but maybe the Great Barrier Reef. So for me, that was great, and I suddenly realised this whole world of opportunity was out there. And as a year 12 student who probably spent way too much time riding horses and not enough time studying vet science, I just missed out on as an applicant, and ended up in a law degree in Wollongong Uni. I did about 3 weeks of that before I realised this is definitely not a path I wanted to follow. And I found myself a job, walked into Centrelink, basically applied for about 10 jobs, and got a job on a private place near Rocky. I caught a bus from Sydney. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was completely out of my league and my comfort zone. But the one thing I had going for me was that I was really enthusiastic, and I could probably ride a horse pretty well, so that did help. But I guess when I got there, it was a really great opportunity. It was all new to me, and I just had to have a completely open mind about everything. And it was a pretty rough little show. I remember getting chased through a wooden fence by a cow, and the cow kept coming with me, so that was interesting. So I soon realised that, and that sort of enterprise ended up going a bit into tourism and everything else, and I thought, well, this isn't really what I want to do. I'd worked at riding schools and taken people riding horses, and I'd done all that, and I didn't want to do that. So I ended up at Longreach College doing a horse breaking school with John Arnold, and he was a pretty good mentor at the time because I was, a fairly English-based sort of rider. And then after that, I ended up getting my first big job in a big cattle station near McKinley, and that was a great experience. It was 1 million+ acres and pretty terrible accommodation and a pretty sort of older crew of men, but I grew up with 4 older brothers, so I sort of had a fairly good handle on how to look after myself. But it definitely was an experience that my parents probably would have, had they known where I was heading off to, they might have freaked out a bit. But it was all great, and everyone was pretty good there. And from there, I sort of, after, ended up back in Sydney for a while and attempted uni for the second time with some convincing from my folks, and into an ag business sort of course this time. But again, I did 1 semester and just decided, still for me, working with cattle and with horses was definitely where I wanted to be. And so I came back to Queensland, and I brought a boyfriend with me, funnily enough, but we ended up on a place near Julia Creek this time with a corporate agricultural company, which was a totally different experience from what I'd had previously. And it's where I've been pretty much ever since. And I spent 3 years on that place, learning stock work, and I got to do a traineeship through that company, and it was AA company. And eventually we transferred to Gregory Downs, which is where I still am 19 years later, in a completely different role, but effectively with a different corporate company, because there was a transition of ownership about 8 years after we arrived here. I did have a couple of kids in amongst all that after doing heaps of years in the stock camp. And my first child, though, I found out I was pregnant. So I sort of thought, right, well, what am I going to do now? This is, for me as a young girl, there wasn't a huge number of pathways ahead in the corporate world at that time. And I had seen a few other sort of people, females or males, working in extension type roles, but they'd had to go to uni to do that. So I decided to try again with uni, but this time I did it externally through UQ in Gatton, and same as Sam. And this time I did a animal science and a rangelands management degree through uni, and attempted that, but I was still working a lot in the stock camp through my pregnancy, and for the next few years after my first child was born, it was still something I really kept a handle on, and it was just part-time after he was born. But uni for me was part-time as well, and eventually I had my second child as well 4 years later, and I remember sitting there thinking, I've only got 4 subjects to go, you can do this. And I sat there and did chemistry with my second toddler on my lap, and just thought, this is ridiculous. What am I doing to myself? But it was worth it in the end, because it certainly opened up a lot of new opportunities for me in the ag sort of industry outside the traditional sort of stock work sort of role. And I certainly put that uni degree to good use, and it took me 9 years to complete. So I definitely took the scenic route. But eventually it paid off. And I remember most of you guys think it's pretty hilarious, but when I first started doing uni, internet was a brand new sensation out in remote parts of the world, and I had 1 gigabyte a month that cost me about $80 to $90 to have, and trying to study everything online with that was impossible. But anyway, times are easier now, and you can do a lot more things. And I still study now, in fact, just a very slow pathway to a master's degree in livestock science, but it's much easier now in terms of internet access and having some connections and things like that. So, yeah. And now my role is effectively with a corporate ag company, so I still have the benefit of being on station, and but I provide, you know, a lot of support to the managers on all the northern stations in this corporate business, and also head office as well. So, but I'm lucky enough that most weekends, or at least a few days every fortnight, I'm out mustering and helping in the yards, which for me is still one of my favourite things I can do, because it really helps remind me why I actually do what I'm doing in the rest of my job.
Yeah. Can you just go into a bit more depth about what you actually do day to day as a production advisor?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, it's all biosecurity. As you can imagine, there's a fair bit of media hype around biosecurity hazards at the moment that are just to the north of Australia. So preparedness for the business is really important, focusing a lot on getting that corporate structure right around biosecurity planning. And also I do a fair bit of work just with any research and development that's happening in the business, supporting managers who are, you know, undertaking projects with universities or trials with livestock, you know, products or whatnot. So I have a lot of oversight with that. And the other part that I do that's really big for the business is rangeland management, which is grass budgeting. So at the start of every year, we'll do a fairly huge round of pasture inspections, checking land condition, looking for problems that might be emerging across the northern stations, and that can take a couple of months to get through to everybody, and there's just one of me doing that, so it can take a fair while, and then reporting back. So a lot of my job is outside in the sun, which is great, out in the paddock, or you know, talking and working with managers or whatever. And the other part of that, my job, is definitely back in the office, preparing reports and feeding that information back into head office, which obviously being a corporate entity, there's a fair bit of accountability and responsibility that they have with all of their major, like their large properties, so back to their investors. So yeah, so that's what I do. And I guess the other part of my job, like I was saying, my most favourite part is definitely getting to jump into the stock camp and relive my days of rough and tumble, which as a young person was definitely a great experience for someone from Sydney who, you know, had no idea that world existed. And I definitely encourage anybody who's really keen to give it a try to consider a corporate business, because there's definitely a lot of options. And I guess for anybody who's looking at starting out, it's a bit different now to when I started. It's probably a lot better now, safer. You know, there's a lot of opportunities for, you know, girls and boys from, you know, who aren't off properties necessarily, and I certainly wasn't. I guess if you can ride a motorbike or a horse, that definitely might set you up for these northern sort of places where horses and motorbikes are still readily used. But just like Sam said, having the right attitude, being willing to work hard and just give something a try, and presenting yourself the right way can also really go a long way just to getting your foot in the door with some of these companies. And another thing you might consider doing is just getting his, you know, holiday experience with somebody safe and trustworthy, or some family, friends, or whatever. But I didn't have anything like that. And remember cold calling people for jobs. And so you've got to have a bit of courage as well about where you might end up. But yeah, consider the risks and think about where you'd like to work. There are a lot of young people around now, and it's a great community for young people to experience, you know, a gap year or two. And for us in a corporate situation, we get a lot of gap year staff every year. So there'll be, you know, hundreds of applicants who will come out of high school looking for that 1 year adventure before they go and do ag business or similar. Some of them would be off properties, but some are not. And yeah, out of that cohort of young people, you always get a group that just love it so much. They keep, they stay, they choose that pathway of, you know, going ahead in a leadership role in the corporate sort of situation. You know, you can start off for third year or fourth year. Jillaroo or Jackaroo will have an opportunity to be considered for a leading hand role in a stock camp before they could potentially go into head stockman role. And then from there, you know, it's overseer to assistant manager to manager. And I guess, you know, that's the stock work side of it. But in a large sort of corporate entity like ours, or where I work, there's dozens of other employment opportunities. There's bore runners, there's mechanics, there's gardeners, there's cooks, there's cleaners, there's you know, station office assistants. There's, you know, there's a lot of different opportunities if you just want to get out here and experience it for the first time, but don't necessarily have the agricultural background. But one thing I would say is a pet hate of most mums and managers' wives who have children is governesses that want to come out and be a governess but never actually be in the schoolroom. So you've got to, you know, you've got to come out with the right job hat on and be willing to do your position. And, you know, if you find the right employer and you're a bit green, like we've had a young girl here for the last couple of years, and she came up as a cleaner. She'd never worked in stock camp, but her, you know, her background was from Adelaide, and now she's in the stock camp. She did that 1 year of, you know, just a little bit of experience, a bit of her normal job. When they were a bit short-handed, they'd send her out, she'd get a bit of practical experience. And for her now, that was her segue into being like in the stock camp. So being open-minded about how you might also get in might help you sort of get your foot in the door as well. Within, especially in a corporate situation. I can't talk as much to a private, but yeah, so that's something I would say. And if you're unsure and you want to go off and do a trade, I can guarantee that if you're a mechanic or an engine, you know, an electrician or a boilermaker, you're guaranteed to be considered a great candidate for a stock work role as well, because there's always room for really highly skilled tradespeople who just want to do something different as well on stations too. So there's a huge number of pathways in now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and a lot of the corporates actually, and I guess everyone in ag is very supportive of those that actually want to come and get experience as well, which is really, really helpful for those that don't actually have a foot in the door already. You did touch on early in your career being in, it was like a male-dominated kind of industry at that stage. It is definitely changing, and on the call today we actually have all female, so it kind of shows just how much the industry is changing. But how did you navigate that as a young woman going into an industry with, I guess, a lot of males?
It was very frustrating sometimes, because I was, you know, I went to work every day with a completely, I'm going to work my butt off attitude. because I'm new and I'm female and I'm not from up here. So I had that mentality that I've got to prove to these people that I work with that I'm deserve to be here. And it's a little bit sad that I had to do that, but at the same time, it made me a better employee as well. And it made me open to learning. So I found myself a couple of mentors who were male, and they were not purposeful mentors. They were just people who I just thought, I reckon I could learn off that person, and they've shown me interest enough that they'll be willing to share their knowledge with me in a non sort of condescending way. They can see that I'm really interested. So just showing your energy and your passion, and sort of making good choices around, you know, your friendship groups. And I was the only Jillaroo for a couple of stations for a long time. And I remember when I came to Gregory, I had the first Jillaroo in the stock camp with me I'd ever had. And it was like great fun. You know, there's two of us. But I also had great fun with just the fellas as well. So it just depends on your crew. And that's the same in wherever you work. The people you work with make or break how enjoyable your job is. I guess when you're on a property, living, working, sharing everything together can be a bit challenging, especially for the first bit of time. Like, you know, usually you're housed somewhat separately, you know, females and males, or maybe there's some shared facilities, but, you know, most places will provide that. So you do get a bit of downtime, which I found was really helpful for me, just being able to escape and be myself and sort of make sure I took time out, and had some time out, you know, sort of thing. When you had your day off, go and disappear and wash your clothes and just, you know, take a few deep breaths. But I guess in terms of my career stuff, I definitely was fairly new, so I hadn't come from a property, so nobody was looking at me like, oh, she's going to make something of herself in this ag industry. You know, it just wasn't there. Whereas now I noticed that background in ag and that enthusiasm to progress is definitely there. But even without it now, we're seeing a lot of young women who haven't necessarily got an ag background who are progressing pretty quickly up the chain in several roles. So, and it may not be that they're a head stockman or a manager, but they might be a business analyst or, you know, some other sort of quite senior role in the corporate sort of entity. And there are examples where, you know, there's young women I know of who aren't even from Australia and have no farming background, but who are now leading stock camps and things like that in the Kimberleys and things. So it really is about where you place yourself and how much effort and energy you put into trying to learn everything you can, and finding people who want to support you and help you learn and focusing on them. They're not always there. That, you know, you're always going to work for different people. And if it's really not working out, move on. Like, there is so many opportunities. However, having said that, I would also say that persist as long as you can, because as Sam said, that long-term employment, that ability to commit and that ability to demonstrate that you're really a good, solid employee it goes a long way to helping you in the next phase of your job. So, yeah, so I guess in terms of what else you can do, as Sam said, upskill as much as you can. If studying is an option, look at doing that. It really does help go a long way with even just your own knowledge and industry sort of awareness. There's so much going on in industry that's not just at the farm level, it's also the big picture stuff. And the more people we have aware of that and educated in that space, the better it is for us who work in industry as well. And also for getting more people back into industry and interested. So nobody in my family has any idea why I did what I did, except they think I love horses. But it's an interesting dinner conversation when I go back to my Sydney-based relos and tell them what I do, and they still can't picture it in so many ways. So, you know, it really is a different world out here, and the more connectivity we get between the, you know, the urban population and the rural population, the better it is for everybody. So, and I just want to say too, like, I get to go on tours of abattoirs and feedlots and things like that for my job, and I definitely encourage anybody to think in those roles. if that's something they're interested in, because I think one of the most important industry groups in our whole ag beef production sector is those process workers in the supply chain. You know, they have a really fundamentally important role. Go and understand them, appreciate what they're doing, and bring that support back, because they group, you know, positions like those in feedlots and abattoirs and things are just as important as the positions that we have on the stations in the dirt and the dust with the cattle and the horses while they're at that end of the production chain. So understand and learn as much as you can about the entire ag supply chain, and one of the best ways to do that is to either go and work amongst it or get involved in programs that help show you and educate you on the whole supply chain, because that is a really helpful thing that I've found as well, is understanding as much as you can about what industry you're working in, and not just being, you know, focused on the farm stuff, because that's very important, but the whole rest of the whole industry relies on everybody understanding and supporting each part of that supply chain. So, yeah, that's something I've really found useful too.
And not only does that help you, I guess it also helps, like, you might see other opportunities that you might also be interested in if you look at the industry as more of a supply chain as a whole. Like, there might be, you might be enjoying what you do now, but a few steps down, there might be something that is really your passion, which is always a key. So I'm going to spotlight Sam again, and then I've got a couple of questions for you both. So just give me a second. Perfect. Okay, so I've got 4 rapid fire questions. We've got 10 minutes left, so I think we can do it. The first one was, what subjects did you do at school? So Megan, if you want to start, and then we can go to Sam.
I did biology. I made sure I did that. I did ag science. There's 4 of us doing that in my boarding school. And I did English, maths, the usual, and geography actually was quite a good one, because it talked big picture around global issues, and food security was one of those. Which links directly back to ag. And I did horses. For me, that was, you know, the big hook to go to that boarding school. But yep, that was my, and I did chemistry, suffered through that, but I didn't really need it. Yeah, so don't panic if you haven't done your pure sciences, if you're going to do science at uni. Yeah,
excellent. Sam, yourself?
Yeah, so I did similar to Megan actually, and yeah, definitely suffered through chemistry and physics, that's an impossible subject. But yeah, what I would say to that though is, you know, I think we probably sweat on the subjects that we do at school, and, you know, being so far from it now, I think, you know, do what you love, do what you're interested in. If you're interested in geography, but you don't think that it'll, you know, be an advantage to maybe the university degree you want to do it anyway, because it's what you actually, you know, it's an interest. And I just think that the more that, in my life anyway, the more that I've stayed on that road of what I'm interested in, the better the door that opens for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think going through high school, there was definitely a couple of subjects that I could have done that, as you say, you're actually interested in. But now there's so many pathways and different, like, if you don't necessarily have the right subjects to get into a uni degree or something, there's ways and means around that. So yeah, you're right. Exactly, bridging courses. Yeah, you don't have to sweat it. There's definitely a way to get around it. Okay, so the second one was, actually, I'm going to leave that one. That's all. I think that's a good one to end on. Network. So we spoke about holiday experience and how to go about it. A major one, I think, especially those that don't necessarily have connections, is where to start. So as someone who maybe lives in town or lives in the inner city and doesn't necessarily have family connections in ag, have family connections in ag or something like that, how do they get started?
I'll just quickly jump in. My son admittedly has a connection to me and we live on property, but he is involved in a certificate through his year 11 and 12 in ag. And there are plenty of boys like him who don't have farms. So through that program, some of the schools offer that and help connect them to farms where they can connect and do time in the holidays. One other suggestion is that there are courses available. Catherine which is through Charles Darwin University for kids starting out or anyone starting out, and they offer short and long certificates in ag, which just get you the fundamental basic skills that might get you ready for a job. And up there are people looking for workers all the time. So, you know, that can feed into other options. So that's in terms of the education. And I'll let Sam fill in terms of the private sort of access, but corporates will also do induction programs for new staff every single year. And helps, you know, get that new 17 or 18-year-old ready for the job before they go out into the real job themselves. So that's definitely an option to consider too.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Sam?
Yeah, so I think too, Megan talked about it before, like cold calling. And I think, you know, I know that takes a lot of bravery, but that, you know, you just don't know where that's going to lead you. Hey, so like even, you know, someone in the middle of Sydney, I guess, Megan, like your local vet, right? Like while that local vet in the middle of Sydney probably isn't preg testing, you know, thousands of cattle a day, they will have access to other vets that are, right? And so go and do a few weeks with a vet somewhere that's doing that. And once you get your foot in the door, you'll end up talking to producers. And then, you know, if you show that, like we keep speaking about, like you show that bit of enthusiasm and initiative, producers will nine times out of 10, they'll be willing to, you know, give you some advice or even take you on themselves. And you'll get that foot in the door. Yeah, I think that's, you know, the now DAF. So and like Megan said, the corporates, they're all online, right? So, you know, you've only got to look up, even a lot of the bigger private landowners have a space online, web pages. So, you know, look them up, and it's all pretty easy to find out how to get employment with them. But yeah, if it's holiday experience, then yeah, I think, you know, your local vets. I will quickly tell a story about we had a friend here, well, a guy that we didn't know, actually, friend of a friend of a friend, and he was middle of Brisbane, had no connection at all, and just kept banging on about it to, you know, mates that he wanted to end up in the bush. And that story ended up getting to us over dinner one night at the Sunshine Coast, and we said, yeah, right, if he's that keen, he's been telling everyone, we'll send him out for the holidays. He was supposed to only come for a couple of weeks. He ended up staying for 6 weeks, went back to Brisbane, shut his business down. He was a gold coal plumber, and came out and worked for 2 years, you know. So don't be frightened to put the word out there a little bit. And you know, Australia is a pretty small place. Hey, like someone will get wind of it, and people are wanting to help.
Definitely. I do have, I think the other one's a bit too loaded, so we will go with one that was sent in, which was, do you think that the industry, or what do you think the industry will be like in the future, and do you think it will continue to grow?
Absolutely. There's a lot of challenges, and as an industry cohort, we've got to work through those challenges and find innovative ways to face them head on, and you know, solutions. But I think you young guys have got a pathway in that if you choose it too. You know, and because there is a lot of opportunity to develop new technologies that improve, you know, certain elements of agriculture, and there is a whole growth of population worldwide. So the protein demand is only growing too. So if we're talking beef, absolutely, it's fundamentally important that we're still here, and it's even more fundamentally important that we're recruiting people who are passionate about it and want to see it grow and thrive. And that's where we hope that you guys come in, because you know, we've got a lot of people coming from ag backgrounds, but we, like I said before, we need the whole population of Australia, or effectively a proportion of it, supporting and promoting ag in this country, because we do a great product, and a whole lot of great products, and it is a fantastic industry to work in, and I would never go back and do something different if I was given a chance to. So yeah, grab hold and get involved.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, like most industries, but I think, as Megan said, we're, you know, exponentially growing as a global protein needers now, and you know, there's jobs that aren't even invented yet that are going to be around, you know, in years to come. I think that sure, in the past few years, just because of exponential growth, there has been a bit of a loss of connection between urban and rural, but I think as the consumer needs or wants to be more connected to the food that they're eating, as you know, that's the trend now, isn't it, to understand what's on your plate. I think, you know, the need for producers or protein suppliers to be, or food and fibre, to be transparent in how that product is getting into the shops and onto plates and clothes and whatever. You know, the opportunities there are huge for skilled and, you know, people that haven't come from rural backgrounds. I think that's a pretty exciting space to be in, really.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so it is 5 o'clock and I will stick to my words. So I would like to say a huge thank you. So we're setting that up to end this because it's such a great discussion. But I'd like to thank both Sam and Megan for joining us today and sharing their knowledge and experience with us all. I hope everyone's learned a lot. I think one of my biggest takeaways has been there's so many opportunities available. Get the word out if you're interested in it. As Sam said, a lot of people have websites and things like that. So even if they don't have any vacancies, but it's somewhere that you want to work or you can see yourself being, get in touch and give them your name and your contact number and let them know, like, get the word out there, because if they might not have a position, they'll know someone that does. So yeah, definitely take as many opportunities as you can. So if you have further questions or would like to get in touch with either of the mentors, I'm going to offer this up. Contact me. My email is meg@chirrup.org.au, and I'll put you in contact with the mentors if that's okay, ladies. I'm sure it will be. Excellent. And yeah, they'll be happy to catch up with you. And likewise, we're always here to help. So with all of that said and done, I would just like to thank everyone again. And yeah, we'll have another webinar hopefully this time next term with 2 more mentors on board. And yeah, keep the conversation going. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.